Okay, welcome to the Lobbyists chat of Girls' Day at the State House. I'm so glad you all could be here to join me today. We're going to start with a round of introductions, and then we have a lot of really interesting questions that have been submitted from our Girls' Day participants. Laura, do you want to kick us off with introductions?
Sure, I'd be happy to. My name is Laura Harper, and I'm a senior associate at Moose Ridge Associates. And so what that is it's a small lobbying firm based out of Augusta. We do state legislative work, not federal work. And organizations hire me and my other colleagues to help do their lobbying at the State House in Augusta. And I've been lobbying either at Moose Ridge or I used to be the policy director at the Maine Women's Lobby. So I've been lobbying for 16 years, which is a long time.
Wonderful, thanks. Sarah, how about you?
I'm on the other end of the spectrum. I don't have many years of lobbying experience. As a matter of fact, I just passed my first year with the Maine Association of Nonprofits, or MAMP, as it's terrifyingly known as. I'm a MAMPian. So I thank God, however, that I have had a year under my belt before I stepped into the COVID mess that we're in right now. I don't know how I could have done this a year ago. So yeah, I come from the politics side of things, and I'm super excited to be the voice and advocating for nonprofits in Maine.
Wonderful, thanks. Megan, how about you?
Hi, my name is Megan, and I am a policy counsel at the American Civil Liberties Union of Maine. And at the ACLU, I am a lawyer who advocates in the legislature around bills that implicate civil rights and civil liberties for people in Maine. I have been at the ACLU for about 3.5 years, but I've been doing policy work on and off since college, which was a very long time ago. More than 20 years. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. And Mallory.
Hi, Mallory Shaughnessy. I currently am the executive director of a statewide association, the Alliance for Addiction and Mental Health Services. So it's an association of safety net providers for mental health and substance use that usually serve the needs of people that have main care or are uninsured. And I've been in this role for about 4 years. And actually, it's the first time in my life I actually had to register as a lobbyist. Part of my work is that I do lobby at the state level for the needs of the mental health and substance use field and for people to get access, and also at the federal level on these issues. But I've actually, when I was standing here thinking about it, I have been doing advocacy work in legislative bodies on and off since I was 20, so 40 years, which seems amazing to me, back in Missouri with Missouri Public Interest Research Group, and doing training for citizen lobbyists to go to Jeff City and lobby at the legislature. And I've sort of done it on and off for 40 years in various ways, working on the political side, advocacy side, policy side, and officially as a lobbyist for 4 years.
Nice.
So there's many ways that you can lobby. Just know that.
Right. Great. And I am Destie. I'm the executive director of the Maine Women's Lobby. And I've only just joined the lobby in January of this year. So I'm really new to the organization. But I'm coming from 11 years of representing the Maine Coalition Against Sexual Assault. On issues of sexual assault and sexual exploitation and trafficking at the Maine State House, and doing anti-poverty work in New Hampshire before that. So I've probably had 14, 15 years of legislative advocacy work. And I came into it from policy and political work, as many people did before that. So wonderful. Oh, it's so fun to have people from a wide range of issue areas and time in the field. So let's just kind of briefly talk about or describe what is the role of the lobbyist? Does anybody have a sentence or two they want to share on what you see as like the work of lobbying?
I'm happy to speak.
Great.
Okay. So I see my role as basically sharing information on behalf of my client, so the organizations that hire me, sharing information with lawmakers about the issues that matter most to them. And because lawmakers, of course, are hearing from many, many people all at the same time, whether it's by phone or by email or by text or social media, it can be really hard to reach and communicate and have a dialogue with your lawmaker. So it can be helpful to, in a very old-fashioned kind of way, to hire someone who's physically in the building where the legislators are and can literally identify them and walk up to them and talk to them. So it sounds very simple, but I think that that's kind of one of the primary purposes of a lobbyist, is to have that person who knows and can identify legislators. There are over 180 of them. So I know each one of them, so I can find the person that I know my client needs to speak with, and I can jump in front of that person in a very polite and graceful way, and then have a conversation with them. And if they're not able to speak with me in that moment, I can arrange to meet with them according to their schedules in the building, in the complex where they are, and make sure that that information is relayed to them and that message is given to them. And then also I can answer questions that they may have, like right in the moment while they have that question. How's that?
Nice. Anybody else have anything to add? Mallory?
Yeah, the only thing I would add is I think that's exactly it, is being that face-to-face connection to a legislator, and realizing that legislators are just like everybody you see on the street, and they don't necessarily know anything about anything that you wanted them to know about. And so your role is to make sure they get that information that you care about, because like she says, they are bombarded, and there's a lot of information to go through, and they don't know about everything. They just don't. We think of them as, oh, it's a legislator, you know, they must know all these things or they wouldn't have run, but that's not the case. People run, and they have to learn, and we have to be there to help them.
Mm-hmm. Any other things to add, Sarah or Megan?
Oh, I'll just throw in, you know, right on top of everything that Mallory and Laura said, and that's that we do have something called term limits. So those legislators are not in office for very long, and they need to get up to speed very quickly, and they can't be expert in all things. And they've got so much material coming at them that really, to have folks like us and many others there as resources is invaluable.
That's the thing I would add, that I think people don't always understand about an issue specific lobbyist. And there are lots of different kinds of lobbyists, and they're all important. But an issue specific lobbyist can have this really deep expertise in a tiny corner of the law. And so it's about the relationship with legislators, but it's also about the relationship with the issue area, or the area of the legal system or the law that you're working on. So when I was working in sexual assault, it's just a really complicated part of the law. And so I was able to sort of deeply understand just a couple of pages of the criminal code. So not a lot, but I really understood it. And so I think sometimes legislators really look to lobbyists on certain issue areas to know, you know, the wide-ranging impacts of an issue and how the law was made in this way, because you actually were there 5 years ago, 10 years ago. So, yeah. Any other things on that legislative, on the lobbyist's process?
I mean, I think the only other thing that I'd add is that, you know, luckily we all get an education in civics and how the legislative process works, but there's a lot more to it once you're in it. And so it can be complicated to understand how a bill becomes a law, to understand the language of the legislature. There really are specific words for specific things. There are specific offices for specific things. So another role that I play with my clients is explaining to them how the process works, and helping them decide at what point in the process as legislation moves through, they want to share information or they want to influence how bills are going. So a lot of it becomes just knowing the rules of the game and where the advantages and disadvantages are depending on, you know, what kind of game you're playing.
Sure. And how would people describe, what are the ways we talk about the different kinds of games? That, right? We often talk about like an inside game and an outside game.
Mm-hmm.
Does anybody want to kind of follow up on that thread? That feels like useful when we think about how lobbying works.
Sure. From the ACLU's perspective, the inside and outside game can be, so an inside game would be the folks on this call in a building, talking with legislators, using our relationships with them and the trust we've built with them to give them information and try to convince them that the thing that's really important to us is also important to them, and that they should do or not do something because they agree with us. An outside game is when we either work with other organizations, nonprofits, or use our members. So if you're an ACLU member, we can reach out to them and ask them to call legislators and ask them to call their representatives to sort of put outside of the building pressure on a legislator to let them know that their constituents care. And depending on the issue and the legislator, an inside or outside game or strategy is, you know, you talk about which one is more effective. And so from our perspective, we do both, but often because we're lobbyists, we do a lot of inside game as well.
Yes. One of our other conversations as part of the Girls' Day series is on community organizing. And then we have community organizers who are talking amongst themselves. And that's primarily an outside, what we think of as the outside game. Folks out in the community and how their voices come to the State House or to their legislators.
And one way of getting involved in that outside game too is writing letters, getting people to write letters to the editors, getting reporters to cover a story, getting opinion columns in the papers, and that really helps to put pressure from that outside on legislators to do certain things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One of the things that Megan mentioned was you know, our trust or credibility in the relationships that we have with legislators to help sort of meet our goals. And that was one of the questions that we had from the Girls' Day participants. How do you build relationships with legislators? So does anybody want to speak to that, what that relationship looks like and how you build those relationships?
To me, one of the primary things is being authentic and being truthful. So you want to make sure they rely on you for good information, for factual information, to hear what's happening within people in their communities. And so, you know, being able to talk to them and build that trust by sharing that kind of information with them, they then feel comfortable coming to you and know that you're not going to give them misinformation. So you build that trust in your communications with them. And I think that's sort of one of the real important things to always keep in mind, that if you don't know something, you say, I don't know that, and I'll find that out for you. But it's just really important for them to know that you are authentic and that you are giving them good information.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and one of the things I think that really surprised me when I came to Maine from out of state was that most Maine legislators don't have their own staff. And so they're working on all of these bills mostly on their own. And so, you know, that means that lobbyists have a lot of power for both good and bad. And so being a person of your word and backing up what you say, and making sure it's truthful, it can be very helpful to you and to legislators who don't have staff and don't know who to go to for certain issues. And so when you build that trust, it can help the legislator sort through this mountain of information that they don't have other people to help them sort through.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things they can do too, before they even consider becoming a lobbyist, because there's probably a few years between now and then, is to get to know their representatives now and in the future. So volunteer on campaigns, and in any way that you can assist them, because it is kind of a two-way street. They need a lot of help just in their campaigns as well. So you learn a lot of the terminology. You learn a lot about what it means to legislate just by being in their presence. So yeah, I highly recommend volunteering.
Mm-hmm.
That's the amazing thing about Maine to me. I did my first years doing this in Missouri, which is a rural state as well, but with some very big cities, and not as easy to get to know your legislators. In Maine, a representative in the House only serves like 9,000 people, and senators are only 35,000. That's not very many, really, when you think about it. And so, you know, you can get to know your legislators in your community, as Sarah said, and make a connection and see who's running, see who's interested. And really, from my perspective, having been engaged in some of that activity helped me as a lobbyist and helps me in my advocacy, because they know I am going to help out as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's that combination of understanding the process, like how things work, like Laura said, and then having the relationships with the legislators, and then having the expertise in the area that you're representing, because no one of those things does the job by itself. And so I think a good lobbyist is trying to cover all of those different buckets of like how things work and who to be talking to, and your particular expertise in the things that you're representing. And so those are all, and different lobbyists may have different skills there. Like I will say, I'm not personally very outgoing. I don't really enjoy having conversations with people I don't know very well. And that, you know, one of the questions we got from one of our participants was, do you have to be outspoken to be a lobbyist? Sort of outspoken, but I'm not really an extrovert. I'm kind of a policy person. I like the policy stuff. And so I just lean heavily on that skill. And it has worked all right for me. So I saw some nods about, do you have to be outspoken? So does anybody else want to add to that?
I'll add to that. I mean, I was very shy when I was a teenager, and have identified as an introvert my entire life. And yet I'm a lobbyist, and I love being a lobbyist. And I think, so I definitely want to encourage the shy girls who think, you know, I could never do this. Like, you can. And for me, if I have a reason to talk to someone, it makes it a lot easier. Like, I'm not very good at chit chat, but I've chosen a profession where I have a reason to talk to someone all the time. It's my job. Like, I have a list of policies or questions or concerns, and that's my reason to talk to someone. And as long as I have that reason, I'm good because I know what I'm going to talk about. So it's really helped me, I think, become a little less shy, but also become more comfortable with the fact that I am an introvert and that I can be really effective at my job and not be an extrovert. Yeah, so I guess that's what I would add.
And I would say too, speaking in public, having to get up and speak in front of the legislative committees, which is part of the job of being a lobbyist. When I was younger, I would practically throw up if I had to get up in front of a group of people. I was so nervous about that. I would do anything I could going through school, all through high school, into college to get out of a presentation. I'll do the backdrop, I'll do the, whatever, to get out of doing that because it made me so nervous. But I've realized over time that, they're just like, your neighbors or your mom or your dad or whoever, and they're just somebody that you're talking to, and it's just a few more of them. So, it's something that you can easily get over too, just kind of being more relaxed about it.
Yep. And it's okay to be nervous.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you're nervous. I still get nervous testifying, and I'm like,
every now and then still, yeah.
No, I mean, it's okay. We're human.
It's okay.
You can still be effective.
At the beginning of every session, at the beginning of every session, the first couple times I testify in front of a committee, I have the jitters and my voice is a little shaky. And by the end of the session, it's like anything, you practice enough and then you get comfortable at it. So that's one of the things I appreciate most about this job is reminding myself that I don't have to be naturally good at something, but if I keep practicing, I can get there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that you keep learning and growing over years, not only in like the skill of public speaking, but in your policy area. You're just not going to know everything about everything, and you can't. But eventually you're going to know a whole lot more than you did. And that's pretty fun. I enjoy that.
And I mentioned earlier that I've only been doing this job for a year. And when I started it, I'd worked for nonprofits, I'd run a nonprofit, but to be the person who's quote unquote the expert about all things nonprofits, and I'm standing up there and testifying, and I'm feeling like I could throw up any moment. It does get better. It does get better. It's practice. And the one thing that really saves me in terms of nerves is just being as prepared as I possibly can. I do all the research. I have all my notes. I really overstudy for it. I go bonkers overboard. But that means when I stand up, I feel like I can talk about this. It's okay. But I can't wing it. There's no winging it.
Yeah.
Not yet.
See, because everybody's learning and growing all the time. So one of the questions is, how do we get them, legislators, to listen to what we have to say? We've talked a bit about the inside ball game, talked a bit about the outside ball game. Talked about building relationships and being credible and authentic. What are some of the other ways or tools or techniques that lobbyists use to help legislators believe, care about, and then take action on the things that we care
about? I guess I can go. You've listed off a lot of it
the things
already. I think for me, I try and find a personal connection, a place of agreement to start from. So a lot of my clients hire me or ask to work directly with me in particularly because I have a lot of good relationships with Republicans. despite working on a lot of issues that tend, I mean, I don't like being partisan, but tend to be issues that are more democratic or liberal or progressive. So I'm the one that they hired to try to get something liberal or progressive passed, and to get Republican support for that. And so when I first began doing this work, it was challenging because I'm a registered Democrat, and I'm pretty liberal and progressive. So I'm like, oh, how am I going to do this? Ugh. But it really comes down to approaching people on a very human, person-to-person level, and knowing that you're going to find a connection, and to build a relationship from there, and then just talk about why issues matter to you. Like, this matters to me because of this being my experience, or this being my family's experience. And, tell me about your family, tell me about your experience, or tell me why you disagree with that. Let's talk about that. And just being very open, listening a lot. I think as a lobbyist, sometimes we can be like, I gotta talk and get all this information out there. And so much of it is about listening and going slow. So listening a lot. And when you really listen and you become very present, you're gonna find those natural connections of how to build that relationship. And then eventually, sometimes it doesn't work, but eventually get to a point where you're like, wow, I think we can find some common understanding on this one thing. Let's see if we can pass that.
I would just build on that if you hear them and you listen to them, a lot of times we're trying to get to a same ending point, doing well by their constituents, making sure there's jobs in their communities, making sure that, education is available, or different things are available in their communities, or that people are not burdened by, different things. So we have end results that we all want to get to, but sometimes what that exactly looks like or how we get there is where we really differ. And to be able to acknowledge that we all have similar kind of goals, or I think it's just really important. And you may still end up agreeing to disagree, but at least you build a little more respect on both sides. And I think that's critical.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I have done is because the ACLU can be, I think both Mallory and Laura are really good at those relationships and people not perceiving them to be ideologically one way or the other. But the ACLU, it's a little hard for legislators to not see you and immediately make impressions. So I do a lot of listening, and I do talk with folks about how at any point in the legislative session, there will be points when Democrats are really mad at me and Republicans are happy with me. More often than not, Republicans are mad at me and Democrats are happy. And sometimes they're both mad at me. But what I try to think about is, if my approaching someone is going to immediately turn them off, who can I send as a messenger that won't turn them off? And who is someone they would hear this from, because they're not going to hear it from me? And so, for an example, we had a bill a couple of years ago about suspending driver's licenses for not being able to pay court fines. And it was getting some resonance with certain members of the committee it was in front of, but some of the Republicans were still a little twitchy. And we got business owners to talk about how it really impacted their bottom line for their workers not to have driver's licenses. And for some, that spoke to certain people on the committee in the way that me as the ACLU trying to talk to people just never would. They think, I'm just talking about the Constitution all the time and not worried about people's daily lives and like making a living. And so it was really important to have someone they trusted who they wanted to look out for say, this is important to me. So that's one of the ways I think getting people to listen is thinking about who will the legislator be most receptive to hear this from.
Getting a credible messenger. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's like when we think about the divide in our government or in our communities these days. And sometimes people are inspired to just like keep saying the same thing louder and louder. And actually, you know, lobbyists are really experts in realizing it's not about us talking a lot of the times. I mean, a good lobbyist is often not the one talking. They're the ones thinking about who should be doing the talking and about what. So I think that that's one of the things I really like about legislative advocacy, is realizing it's not just me, you know, running up to people.
Yeah, absolutely. It's part of our job to also recruit people to be those credible messengers, that they can share their stories, because when, you know, it's not always us that's the best messenger. Yeah, good point.
And so one of the questions that we have is, what do you do when you're not able to persuade everyone? So what then?
Don't take it personally.
Yeah, don't take it personally.
I mean, that's been such a hard lesson for me to learn, you know, how many times I've failed on a piece of legislation and being like, oh, it's me, it's because I wasn't good enough and wasn't smart enough and I wasn't bright enough and wasn't, you know, and like, yeah, you know what? It's not about you. It's not you. You can't win everyone, you know, and all that work that you put into building a relationship and establishing trust with a legislator, working on an issue, working with staff, it never goes to waste. I think that's so important. A lot of the work, a lot of the skills and the resources that lobbyists have takes time, because it takes years to build these relationships. And relationships can get stronger and more effective through failure, frankly. So even when you have a legislative failure, it's not a waste, because you have all that time and that trust and that relationship that you've built with a whole group of legislators and staff that's going to be that much more helpful, and is going to be a resource that you can pull from on the next legislative issue or when you try that one again, you know? So yeah, don't take it personally.
And the only way we've ever made major changes in our society and in our communities, I mean, really major changes, has been some people working and working and working and working over time, little bits, and changing a few minds and a few minds, and then they change somebody else's mind, and it just kind of moves out, and all of a sudden you've got a whole shift in the consciousness and the shift in the community, and something big can happen. So none of that work is ever in vain. It's all moving it forward. It can feel like it though sometimes, but it's not. It's important. It's planting those seeds and watering those seeds, and sometimes they don't come up right, but other times they do. So.
Sarah or Megan, anything to add to that?
I'm muted. I was pretty much going to say exactly what Mallory just said. I find in my own work, advocating for the nonprofit sector, that sometimes I feel like I'm shouting into the wind, but then something will happen, and it's yeah. So it just like these wonderful women said, it's often we're building the case over and over and over again, and it's it'll do you well not to expect immediate change and results.
Yes. Yep. So let's take a little jog over and talk a bit about our current global pandemic. We got some really good questions about whether shelter in place is making it harder to influence legislators, or if it's affected how we're doing our work. It clearly has affected the specific, like, day to day, because the legislature has closed down, and that's a major impact that we're all dealing with. Does anybody want to talk a bit about how our current time has impacted your legislative advocacy?
I can speak that I think a lot of the work has shifted to the federal level. just the federal relief that's come and advocating for more federal relief. Just starting to look towards the legislature now, but we have been talking with members of the governor's staff and working with them. So it depends, you know, right now our focus isn't the legislature, and sometimes that's the case. Sometimes you do shift depending on whether the legislature is in session or not. But sometimes
think
it's a good thing because you get to take a breather and then instead of trying to do it all at once.
Well, I think that's the thing about lobbying, is that it is not just the legislature that you have to move or change or shift or get to do things, but it's the administration, it's the federal level, you know, both the legislative body and the administrative body. So you're always, you know, you're always kind of shifting depending on what's happening. And I think Sarah's right on. I've been totally focused on administrative, advocacy and lobbying, and on the federal level, as we've seen this coming through.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the governor has a lot more power now under the emergency authority that she was given. And so there's still a lot of things that you would, when you're lobbying, it's not just lobbying legislators, it's also lobbying the governor and other decision makers. And so we have been doing a lot of lobbying of the Secretary of State's office and of the governor. And then also, because legislators are sitting at home and they're used to doing, it's a great opportunity to make relationships, even though it's hard, because people are sitting at home, they want to connect, and this is a way to build relationships while we're all sort of not able to do it in person. You have a captive audience because no one else is trying to get their attention aside from their kids and, you know, their spouses.
I would also say that one of the things I think people don't always know about lobbying, like you picture the time when you're in the halls, like the time when you're having a conversation with legislators. But so much of the good work that actually gets things changed happens months and months and years before that. The legislative session starts in January, typically. But, you know, in September, you're having the conversations about what kind of bill could happen now, like what problems are we seeing that we can solve. I think that, you know, the best legislation comes when it's solving a real problem. And so those things haven't changed. We're still seeing real problems. We're still having an opportunity to think about what real solutions are. And then doing some of the more technical work about, you know, okay, if it's this solution, where does the solution live? What part of the law does it live in? Is it in rules? Is it in, you know, organizational policies? All of that sort of thinking and research that makes for a good, effective legislative advocacy can still happen. And so those are some of the things that I've been focused on right now while everything's on hold. The sorts of things that you're doing in August, September, October, when the legislature isn't in session. Yeah. Any other comments on the quarantine?
I'll just add that I don't like it. I mean, when at the last day of session, when there was no public allowed in the building, it drove me crazy. It felt awful. I identify so closely with like the physical plant of the building and the lobby. I mean, it's been really hard. I really like the physical presence of being in the legislature. So yeah. But it's not impossible, but I don't like it. I want to go back.
Yeah. And you can, you know, there's only so many Zooms you can do a day.
Yeah. I'm sure our Girls' Day participants like feel the same with trying to figure out how to do school remotely and not getting to walk the halls.
Mhm.
Sure. Then let's do two of my favorite questions that came from participants. I'm going to ask both of them at the same time, and you can answer either or both. What is the hardest idea you have fought for and lost? Or what is the weirdest thing you have lobbied for? And if everybody has answers for all of them, we can go around, but you may only have one that pops to mind. I don't mind jumping.
I've got a really old one. I've got a really old one that shows you my history.
Sure.
I mean, right now when we go to our cable news, our cable TV, you can turn on local access and see your city council, your town council at work right there. I worked on legislation to get that back in the 1980s, I think it was, or
Wow.
late 70s, where cable was really coming out, and to work to get public access to cable stations is such a weird concept now when I think about it, but that was something that we worked on quite hard because these new cable stations were coming out and they were locking out local information. And so we worked at the legislature in Missouri, and it was happening all over the country. We were part of a huge network, and getting access so that you could have local information on your cable station, which just seems so weird to me now.
Seems weird now, right? Laura?
I don't know what I can say. I mean, I feel like I've lobbied so many hard things. I'm like such a whiner. But I was like, which is harder, marriage equality or trying to raise the tax on cigarettes? I don't know. Those are both really, really hard. But yeah, I mean, but I guess the first thing that came to mind was lobbying marriage equality, and which eventually we got. But I mean, I lobbied it and we failed a couple times. So that was really, really hard, especially as an out lesbian in a long-term relationship. I mean, now I'm married to my wife, but at the time I wasn't able to marry her. It was really, 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 really challenging. And being able to find that courage to use my personal story and to talk about what it felt like to be a lesbian in a long-term relationship and not have the rights to marriage, and telling that story every day is part of my job. And especially with like, I would talk to the people that there was kind of the political assumption that they weren't going to be with us. That was really challenging. But in the long term, I mean, I built some amazing relationships with people that I never would have built if I hadn't worked on marriage equality and talked to them about my life and, you know, the love of my life, my partner at the time, and all of that. So it was very, very, very rewarding, but very, very, very hard.
Yeah.
Thanks for that work.
Thank you. Yeah. The things that feel also personal, I think, are some of the harder things. I mean, I represented victim services advocacy for a long time, and that has this element of like criminal justice accountability as part of it. But I don't, you know, I personally grew up with family members who were incarcerated, and my brother is incarcerated. And so anytime you've got these, the work that you're representing that also has intersections with your just personal life, I mean, the things that I lobby for feel personal to me, but not as personal as talking about, you know, criminal justice reform when you just visited your brother on the other side of the glass, right? That creates a different feeling of being at work, and those are some of the harder things for me. Any other hardest or weirdest? Oh, go ahead, Megan.
I mean, I don't have a hardest there are too many hard bills, but this session when the legislature stopped and adjourned early, and all of the bills I was working on were pushed off until late, not because of work that I had done, just, circumstances and other things. They were pushed till the very end. And so the legislature adjourned, and I had bills that I had gotten a committee to vote unanimously for or almost unanimously for. And this was after just so much work getting the committee to that point. And now it's probably, those bills are just dead. And so that has been the hardest thing, is to be, to lose because you didn't get the votes is one thing. To have no control and to say, like, for me, doing my best and putting my most into it is the most I can say. And like, Laura, you don't take it personally when you lose, but you at least can tell yourself, I did everything I could. Here, there's nothing I could do. There's not another avenue I could try. It's just sort of there. And so that has been, I have only been at the ACLU for 3.5 years, but that has been the hardest lesson, is to be so close and then just nothing.
No, I would ditto that with all the bills that we got to the appropriations table, bills that, bills often end up getting passed and go to the appropriations table and don't get off of it because of finances. But we had a really good shot on a few of them, and they just sat there. And now the whole economy has changed. And when the legislature comes back, all the momentum we had, I don't know if it's going to be able to be lifted up again. So you're right. That's so frustrating.
Mm-hmm. And Sarah, this is your very first session here, and you didn't even get to wrap it up.
Well, my first, right. So I was fairly busy last spring, so that was good.
Oh, right. Okay.
It gave me a good introduction into how this all works. And I'd had a sense just through my political work, and I ran Emerge Maine, which trains Democratic women to run for office. And so I spent a lot of time with women legislators, which was terrific. But the my real first true entree into this work was I spent 3 months with Maine Equal Justice Partners, trying to ensure that Senator Susan Collins didn't change food stamps or Medicaid into a per capita cap or a block grant, and it was a whirlwind education. But what was really challenging was the fact that I had worked for Susan Collins' opponent in a U.S. Senate race. And so, but it's, you kind of have to put that stuff aside. And I certainly do now, after having a career in Democratic politics. I now speak with everyone. I've got good relationships in Senator Collins' office now. And it was a little nerve-wracking at first, but you focus on the issues and you focus on building relationships. And as Mallory said, in being authentic, and you make it work. But it was definitely challenging.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's close out then. We'll follow up on the what's been challenging or weird with our favorite parts of our job. What's the thing that keeps you going, keeps you coming back to work, keeps you feeling okay even when everything's been shut down because of the global pandemic?
Do you mean right now or in general?
Yeah.
As a
no,
lobbyist?
In general. Yeah. What's your favorite part of your job? Or the lobbying part of your job, anyway.
I have to say it's those successes that you get. It's when you've worked hard, you've had people come in, you've talked to legislators, you have informed and educated and brought people on you never thought you were going to get to support you, and you actually get something passed. And knowing that has happened, knowing that could happen again, that just keeps me going and going.
Mm-hmm. Laura, did you have a?
Yeah, I think, for me, it's two things. I mean, what really keeps me going are the incredible clients that hire me. I work for a lobbying firm that, you know, we only accept clients that we share the same values for. So all of my clients are amazing. And so I represent a lot of healthcare and healthcare access clients, environmental clients. And their commitment to their mission and their commitment to making the world a better place and their commitment to justice and access to healthcare is so inspiring. And I get to be in this amazing role where I just help them do these wonderful things, or I help them fight to try to get these wonderful things. I mean, like I said, I fail a lot because we don't pick easy issues to work on. So yeah, they keep me going. And then the other thing is that I'm just a total nerd about the legislature. I love like how old-fashioned it is, and at the same time the modernity that's there. Like I love watching the staff carry a wooden box that literally has the bills in it. And that's what's happening. They have to walk that box all the way across the building to the other chamber. And that's what we're waiting for. Waiting for that person to walk that box over to the, I love that. I love that. I love how it works mechanically. So yeah, that's my other favorite thing.
That's a good one. Megan or Sarah?
I was going to say I'm right there with Laura. You know, there's so many incredible nonprofits doing amazing work, and to be out there on their behalf fighting for them it gets me up every day, and I can't honestly think of a better job for me at this point in my life. I just absolutely love getting up and working for them.
Nice.
So I have two. I have the mission driven, and that it is, it's just important to me to try every day to leave this world a little bit better than how I came into it. And so this is one way of getting to do that. And so the mission drives me in some ways, but also, you know, part of what lobbying is like thinking about what makes people tick, like what are their motivations, and then trying to figure out how to like, and words are not coming, but basically how to use that to connect with people and to make connections, relationships, and then to move them on issues that are really important to me. And so I just really love thinking about, well, this person really likes this and doesn't like that. And so I would try, you know, it's not a game, but it is an intellectual exercise and really trying to think about people's humanity and what makes them do what they do. And it's just fun to think about that. So the fun is what keeps me coming back as well.
Strategy of it all. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It is a lot of fun.
Yeah. And a bit of a chess game, you know, a human nature puzzle, but for people who really like a chess game, that is a good time. And I think for those of us who are doing mission driven work, so everybody on this phone call, you know, to be able to play a chess game that we know has the possibility of significantly improving people's lives. Like, I've worked on some small bills, but that mattered to people, like that made changes, you know, something like a huge, like marriage equality, of course, is making a watershed change in some people's lives. Well, but there's also the, you know, moving a crime from a D down to a, you know, misdemeanor. Well, that makes a big difference for those people's lives. And so maybe it doesn't seem like a big deal, but it's a big deal for them. And to get to put those things together is, yeah, it's a lot of fun, and it feels powerful and exciting and like a good way to spend my time on the planet. Well, does Does anybody have any last thoughts that you wanted to share and you didn't get the opportunity to before we wrap up? Or
I was just going to say there's no lobbying school, right? So there's really no place to go. So, you know, my door is open if anybody has any questions, further questions. And I'm sure the rest of the wonderful ladies here feel the same way. And because this is how it gets done, women lifting up women and providing a network and providing, you know, introductions and because again, this isn't something you can go to school for.
And knowing that it's never too early to start, you can lobby in your own lives for things that you see that need to change in your own schools. You know, if you feel like there's rules or policies that are impacting some people more than others or adversely impacting some over others, you can look at making changes in your own schools and your own systems that you're living within. So know that, I mean, as a I think 7th grader, and again, I'm old, but as a 7th grader, we mounted a campaign and did a petition drive so that we could wear pants to school. Because we had to wear skirts in public school.
Thank you for that work.
Oh, Mallory, that's
Thank you,
awesome.
Mallory.
One. So know that you can make change too in your own locale, your own schools.
Yeah. Well, all right then. I thank you for those last words, and this has been so much fun. And I would agree, Sarah, that it's about learning from each other. And I've always been grateful to have a team of folks around me that I could learn from, and I learned things today. So I thank you all for joining us, and I'll see you next time. See you at the halls.
Thank you
All
for
right.
doing this, and good luck to all of you on your lobby day.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, good luck.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.